Welcome back, guys. We are Elevate, the podcast that elevates issues that matter most to you. Today, I have Sherrell Byrd, my sister, with me, and I'm excited because she was with us last time a few months ago, and she talked about her work as a nonprofit leader and as an activist in South Georgia. So, Sherrell today is going to be blessing us with some amazing topics, telling us what she's been up to over the last few months, and hopefully catching up.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thanks for having me back.
Oh
So
my goodness.
excited.
I am happy you came back.
Yeah,
So,
I know we've been trying to get this together and sync
yes.
everybody's schedule, so we're here. And I'm so
Yes, we're
excited to
here.
be in
And
this
this is
space.
my sister, y'all. Sherelle is my sister, so I love her. Well, let me read your bio for those that may not
Woo.
formally know you. Sherelle is a co founder and co chair of SOWEGA Rising, a coalition that activates activism, organizes organizations, and moves movements forward. She is the founder of the Southwest Georgia Black Chamber, which is an organization that supports opportunities for African American businesses in Southwest Georgia. She's also the CEO of Lady Bird Event Enterprises, which encompasses the BAM agency and Lady Bird Event Design. Sherrell Byrd uses her expertise in small business ownership, marketing, nonprofit management, and communications to assist businesses in creating professional brand and image. Sherrell lends her knowledge and expertise on the following boards, and there is a lot, so I think I may have to pick and choose. But the City of Albany Community and Economic Development Council, Southwest Georgia Community Action Council, SWGA Food Justice Coalition, Empower Health Community Advisory Council, Southwest Georgia Economic Alliance, Voices of Health. This is incredible. Dougherty County Tobacco Coalition, Morehouse School of Medicine, PM3 Community Advisory Board, Advisory Board for the Department of Teacher Education at Albany State University, Georgia Community for Action and Alliance. That's incredible. Um, and she's also a graduate of Westover High School and Georgia State University, and she currently resides in her hometown, Albany, Georgia. And proud mom of Shalise and Sheldon and her two fur babies. I love that.
Thank you.
And of course, we talked about before we started recording that you're about to be an empty nester.
I am. I am. The kids are off to college. My daughter's about to finish her last year at Georgia State. And my
Wow.
son just started at Albany State. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
What does that feel like? Because you're still very young.
It feels, and when I had kids, I remember counting down like the years.
Really?
And was just like, okay, I'll be young enough when they get older to
Yeah.
like enjoy life. So this is great. So,
I love it.
Yeah, so now I'm here and I'm just
Yes.
really excited about, I don't know, the future, like being able to
Yes.
have my time back and just,
Oh, yes.
just like be in my own space and just do
Do things
what
for
I want to do
you.
for me.
And I can imagine. So you have two that's in university currently, which means that you did. I can't imagine what you had to do to get them there.
Yeah.
Like the work.
Yeah. I'm sure they look back now and hopefully appreciate it. But we were the household, like we didn't watch television during the week.
That's incredible.
We didn't eat a bunch of candy. I was really, I think
Wow.
they think I'm a really strict parent, but it was like, you have to focus. And
Yeah.
I'm a pretty focused person.
Right.
And I wanted them to learn discipline early. And so I
That's
think
awesome.
that pays off eventually. So now they're both focused in school and doing well.
And you talk about focus, right? Because we know that you're also a nonprofit owner and or operator, and you run this nonprofit organization that has grown tremendously. What kind of focus does it take to do that?
Well, it's a lot. It's a big question, but like we manage we have like 8 core initiatives.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
every core initiative needs its attention. So like what I love about my work is that like there's no day that's the same.
Yeah.
Every day I'm doing something different. I'm advocating
Yes.
for a cause. I'm somewhere traveling. I'm speaking. So that's
Awesome.
good, but also you have to know and be knowledgeable of all of those different things in some capacity and how it's impacting the lives of people. So
Right.
that takes laser focus to be able to make sure you understand and can advocate on all of these different levels.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a lot to balance.
Yeah.
It's like having multiple plates in the air at one time. But I think I'm learning
Professional
how
juggler.
to, yeah, absolutely.
I love
But that's
it.
what we do in this work, right? In the nonprofit space. So I'm sure you know that as well. So
Oof.
yeah.
I can imagine having 8 core initiatives that I'm focused on. So to be able to do that and to do it well is extremely exceptional.
And thankfully, I can't take all the credit. I've finally gotten to a place now where we have staff. You know, since the
Yes,
last time I met with you,
congratulations.
thank you. I was the only staff person. And
Wow,
now we have a staff of 8. And so as
incredible.
we're growing and getting more funding and partners, that funding is allowing me to get help with people that can take one of those initiatives and run with it. And so we have an amazing team and they're doing a great job with it. So they keep me balanced.
That's awesome. And especially when you have that team behind you.
Absolutely.
Because especially in the work that you do, it requires a village, it requires a collective, because that's what your work is.
Right.
So tell us more about, for those that haven't heard about SOWEGA Rising, what is SOWEGA Rising? What have you been doing over the last, say, 6 months?
Whew, okay, well, so SOWEGA Rising, we're a nonprofit advocacy organization. We're nonpartisan, and our mission is to mobilize people and resources to improve the quality of life of historically marginalized populations in rural communities. So we're specifically focused on Southwest Georgia, which is our name, SOWEGA. It's an acronym for Southwest Georgia.
Yes.
And so we are the voice for the voiceless. You know, we get
Love
out
it.
here and we advocate to
Yeah.
federal, state, and local officials to be able to help people get what they deserve and what they need in their communities.
Yeah.
But we don't just stop there. We really are about empowering people to
Yes.
use their own voice. Like we don't want to always advocate for folks,
Right.
but we try to build movements and we try to teach people the principles of organizing and activism so they can get out here and they can fight for themselves. And we
Yeah.
want to fight alongside them. And so we do, like I said, have 8 core initiatives. So
Right.
I'll try to run through them really quickly. So rural health is a big one, and I'll talk a little bit about the work we've done there. Food justice, civic engagement, Q justice, which is our climate, utilities, and environmental justice. Racial equity, which is
Wow.
like kind of central to all of our work.
Yeah.
Historic and cultural preservation, criminal justice reform and public safety, and then economic justice.
Wow.
So all of those things, while it seems like a lot, they're so intersectional.
Yeah.
So it's like racism and poverty really
yeah.
helps to create this environment where these things are impacting lives of people in an adverse way.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so you'll see how many like rural health and food justice are so related.
Yeah.
And then you'll see how economic justice and housing and utilities, all of those things tend to be related to each other.
Absolutely.
So that's how our work is connected in many ways. So it feels like we're juggling a lot, but like a lot of times those things are like, we're right there in the same space a lot of times.
Right.
So I will say, since we last talked, one of the things that we've been working on this year is, I will say, Medicaid unwinding. A lot of people aren't familiar with Medicaid unwinding. Have you heard
I'm like,
of
what is that? It's coming.
Right.
I haven't.
So during the pandemic, so if you're on Medicaid and you have Medicaid as your primary insurance for your health, during the pandemic, before the pandemic, you would have to re-enroll every year.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Since the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, they ceased re-enrollment. And so for those like 3 years of the active pandemic, you did not have to go through that re-enrollment process.
Right.
A lot of new people came into Medicaid when they were on the pandemic, and they got pandemic Medicaid and did not have to re-enroll.
Right.
Well, the federal government says, well, let's start that back again. And so this year they decided to start this re-enrollment process. And so a lot of people don't know, like if you just got Medicaid during the pandemic and never had to re-enroll, this will be your first time experiencing that process.
Wow.
And then for other people, a lot of people just don't know. They haven't gotten the notification. They haven't seen the notices that said you have to re-enroll.
Yeah.
And so the state of Georgia is projected to have at least 500,000 people that will lose their Medicaid.
That's a lot of
if they don't re-enroll, and they probably will. And so that's the projection.
Wow.
And so we've been doing all kinds of outreach, letting people know, like, hey, you have to re-enroll. You cannot miss your re-enrollment date. You have to check your Gateway account and make sure your information is current so that you can get the notification. So you don't lose. 'Cause the last thing you want, especially as a parent, if your child is on like state Medicaid, is for you to go to the hospital for an emergency and find out you're
You
not
don't have
covered.
insurance.
And
Right.
that is absolutely what's happening. And so as a result of that, we're collecting stories
Yeah.
from people that have lost their Medicaid,
Wow.
because like this is a mess. Like this is just one of the things where government really didn't think things through.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that this was going to be a mess. They're still hiring people to even do the re-enrollment process while it's happening. So
Ah.
it's just insane what
Came up
they're.
with this policy. Let's do this,
This
but not
seems fun. Let's
a
just do
plan for
this.
proper implementation
Right.
of it.
Absolutely. And so what's ultimately going to impact are single Black women, mothers, people that are elderly, lower income. Those are the folks, like those marginalized groups, that are going
Right.
to lose their Medicaid and be the most impacted by this. So
Wow.
we're collecting stories right now to understand how this is impacting folks so that we can go back and advocate.
Yeah.
So that's one big thing that we're working
powerful.
on. And then we also actually just went to DC to
Nice.
talk on the federal level about
Wow.
medical debt, which is another issue that's impacting people.
Yes.
Georgia is one of the highest states of uninsured in the
Wow.
nation. I think we're like in the top 5 for
Wow.
uninsured Georgians. And we also have a huge coverage gap, which is why we advocate for Medicaid expansion,
Right.
because there's a lot of people that still are not able to get Medicaid because of
Yeah.
this coverage gap. And so we went to DC to like talk to them and to bring people's stories
Wow.
to the legislators and
Right.
to the ones that can create the rules and policies, to tell them like how Medicaid is impacting people's lives, and that, you know, we go to the hospital to try to get help and to try to be whole, and sometimes we come out worse than when we walked in because
Very
of
true.
the financial burden that we
Yeah.
have from being taken care of and having our needs met in a hospital.
Right.
You walk out of the hospital and now you get collections calls, and you
Right.
can't get credit, and you can't buy a house because you
Right.
have this huge medical debt on your
Yeah.
credit. And so we were excited that like maybe 2 days after we left DC, we found out that they're actually going to move forward with some proposed
Wow.
legislation to help to reduce medical debt here in America. So that is
That's
huge.
incredible. That's a huge
You
win.
never have like that type of like reaction that
That's a
quickly
huge
in
win.
our work, and so we were super
Wow.
excited about that.
That is, you guys are trailblazing,
Thank
like
you.
the Southwest area. Well, it sounds to me like it's more than Southwest Georgia, because even legislation you're advocating for is on a federal level. So, and essentially, it's impacting a lot of Americans.
And what we do, what's become kind of our niche, is we a lot of times will see issues being discussed, and they're discussed from an urban lens, and the rural voices are left out. So we're typically the
Yes.
organization now that folks call on to say, hey, let's hear how this is impacting rural communities. Let's hear how this is impacting people of color living in rural communities.
Yeah.
So we're always on the forefront of making sure that rural voices are at every table, and that
love
people are not, you know, especially here in the state of Georgia, we always try to tell folks there is life outside of Atlanta.
We're here in Georgia, you're just
There's
like
human
Atlanta.
life outside, right? Like Georgia is, and it's like, no, there's a whole state,
A whole state.
outside of Atlanta, and they have totally different needs and
Right.
totally different issues. And a lot of times these issues impact people the same, but it looks different. It feels different when you're in rural communities because you don't have the same legislation and policies and change that's happening in more progressive parts of the state.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that takes a lot more advocacy. And like in Atlanta, there's like probably 50 advocacy organizations, right?
Imagine.
On one
Yeah.
street in
Right.
Atlanta. But in the rural communities, there's just not. So there's not
Wow.
enough voices that are advocating for folks in rural communities. And we're glad to be able to fill that space.
That's awesome. What are some of the issues that rural communities are dealing with? For those that are just completely disconnected, we're like, look, we're from the city, we don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Like what's the extent?
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'll tell you one example of our work where we started was with utilities.
Wow.
So Georgia is again one of the states with the highest rates of energy costs.
I just saw my power electric bill the other day. I am not happy.
It's
but
not a
please
good
continue.
thing. And it's because of so many things, right? Like we have hotter summers, so
Right.
we're pulling more air. We have colder winters a lot of times. Like our winters are getting colder.
Right.
But in the South, in rural communities, in South Georgia specifically, we have really outdated housing stock. So our houses were built in like the 1950s. utilities. So the
Wow.
codes are outdated, and like they're not weatherized. They don't have energy efficient upgrades and things like that. And people can't
Right.
afford those things.
Yeah.
Not to mention, just in Albany alone, like since 2017, we've had tornadoes. We've had
Wow.
in 2018 a Category 4 hurricane to hit
Wow.
Albany, and like we've never seen that type of natural disasters before due to climate change. And people want
Right.
to say, "Oh, climate change isn't real." Yeah, it's real.
It is very
We've
real.
never seen
Right.
a Category 4 come in that far inland in the state of Georgia,
Mm.
and so that impacts, like, those houses are still in disrepair, some of them, and people are
Wow.
still living in them. And so those are the types of things that drive up utility costs. So people are
Wow.
paying anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month, we've learned.
Oh my
And these are
goodness.
folks living in low income housing and
Oh
public housing,
no.
like struggling, like burdened to pay their
That's
bills. These are
horrible.
seniors, like fixed
That's
income,
horrible.
that are struggling to pay their utility bills. And so when we started peeling back the
Mm.
layers of the issue and really just trying to understand, like, why are these bills so freaking high? That's when we started understanding it's a climate change issue, it's a housing issue,
Right.
it's all of these issues that really, you come to Atlanta
Mm.
and they're building new houses all the
All the time.
time. So you don't have to worry
Absolutely.
about energy efficiency because you
That's
can move
right.
into a new apartment complex.
Absolutely.
But you don't see that kind of development in rural communities. And so people
Wow.
are stuck in these older homes and in
Mm.
these landlord situations where they're at the mercy of their landlords to repair the homes, and that's just not
Doesn't happen.
happening. So that's just an
Wow.
example of the work. So that speaks to utilities, it
Quality
speaks
of
to
life.
housing issues, and we know housing is a social determinant of health.
Absolutely.
So that's some of the work. That's what it looks
That's
like.
huge.
Yeah, and that's
Like,
when I say it's all intersectional. That's when all of those things
absolutely.
come together to make this huge problem. And now folks are paying $1,000 a
I
month.
can imagine. And it reminds me of a story of a man. I think he was about 70 years old. His birthday was going to be the next day, and I was campaigning or organizing at the time,
Yeah.
and was knocking on his door, just talking to him about what are the things you want to see. And he's like, I want to show you my utility bill. And he goes and grabs his bill, and I think it was around, if I remember correctly, $600 and something for 1 month.
For a
We're talking
70-year-old
about a
man.
1-bedroom apartment. I can understand
Yeah.
how he was getting billed that much money for a small apartment.
Right.
And so he was also a veteran, also obviously a senior citizen,
Right.
really didn't know how to advocate for himself. And this is in Mableton.
Yeah.
So we're not, obviously not really rural, but just thinking about how those issues
Yeah.
are happening. So I can
Yeah.
imagine we're talking about the areas like Albany,
Right.
How these issues may be a lot more exasperated.
And it's a statewide issue, and we really do need policies at the state level that are going to regulate energy. They're going to
Please.
regulate landlords to make sure that
Absolutely.
they're taking care of their properties. So
Yeah.
he's at the mercy of a landlord
Right.
who, if he doesn't fix up his property, the burden's going to be on him
Yeah.
to take care of the high utility costs. So
Right.
there's not a lot of legislation in the state of Georgia, unfortunately, because a lot of our state representatives and legislators are landowners or property owners.
Makes sense.
And so they're not going to make the rules that regulate them and,
Wow.
and get into their bottom line. And so that's our fight typically. There's a lot of preemption laws that even don't allow local governments to be able to regulate property owners the way they really need to be regulated to protect the people. So
It's like almost like we need to. It sounds like even like some laws or policies may be also like antiquated. I wonder like when is the last time we've looked at these laws and had some change around it.
Absolutely. And I think it's honestly, and this goes into our conversation earlier, this is why we got to vote.
Yes.
This is why we got to run for office. Like we
Yes.
need people because a lot of times our legislators are older,
Right.
they're wealthier, so they're not impacted by high utility rates. They can pay their
Absolutely.
bills. They can buy a home that's energy efficient, so they
Right.
don't have to think about these things.
Yeah.
We need common folks like us that are close to these issues, that
Yeah.
are at the state capitol,
Right.
that are creating laws because we know how this impacts everyday Georgians.
Right.
And so I think that's obviously where voting is so important.
Yeah.
We got to vote for folks that are speaking to these issues.
Yeah.
And if we don't see people speaking to these issues, that means you need to be the person
That's right.
to jump into office and make the laws that we need for the state.
That's such a big task. Like,
Yeah.
like just like going back to the voting part. A lot of people don't vote. I remember knocking on a door and it was an older gentleman. He had to be probably about 74. And, trying to get him to go out to vote and give him some literature. And he's like, I haven't voted, and I think he told me about 50 years.
Oh, no.
And it just broke my heart because I was like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
50 years.
Yeah.
And you can sense and feel like the disappointment. He's like, nothing's ever going to change. It's never going to change.
Yeah.
And so many people, they're walking around and they don't feel like things are ever going to change.
Yeah.
Things are always going to be the same.
Yeah, and I think that's where education comes in, and
Yeah.
that's part of the work that we do. Like our civic engagement work is like central to what we do,
Right.
because we really work hard to help people understand like your everyday life
Yeah.
is politics. Like somebody has
Absolutely.
made a decision about every single part of your life,
Absolutely.
what you eat, how you drive, what
Right.
your house looks like, how many trees are in your neighborhood. All of that is a decision by a legislator somewhere
Right.
that you hired with your vote. And so if you don't like it, you can fire them also with your
Yeah.
vote. And then I think too, we do get into a situation where we vote and then we don't do anything else.
That's good.
And you
If
can't just vote. You have to
Right.
vote and hold them accountable. You have to vote
That's
and
good.
show up. You have to go to these meetings. That's where a lot of these conversations are happening
Right.
about the things that govern your day-to-day life. And a lot of times
Yeah.
people just vote and they go home. And so we
Wow.
encourage folks like, no, stay in their face. You have the right to call them. You
Yeah.
have the right to email them. You have a right to show up at the people's house at the state capitol in Atlanta. Like
right.
that's your house.
Right.
You pay for that with your tax dollars. And so you have the right to show up and knock on their door. I go to DC all the time, but I'm not special. It's like anyone can go to DC. Anyone
Wow.
can talk to their state senator. Like you can walk into their office. You don't need an appointment. And so people don't realize the power that they have. And that's unfortunate. I think we in America have shifted the power to where
Wow.
it seems as though the politicians, we work for them. And no, they work for us.
That's right.
They work at our pleasure,
That's right.
And so we have to keep that present in the minds of our citizens. Like they work for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I love that it's shifting the power back. Power that has already been there but has not been recognized
Right.
because of things like structural racism
Absolutely.
and poverty that makes you feel powerless.
Yeah.
Because if you're struggling for your basic needs to be met, how powerful do you feel?
Right.
So I think it's reminding people that and regardless of what your situation is or what you're facing, you still have the power to advocate for yourself and for
Absolutely.
change.
And I think too, we in America have like made our political leaders celebrities,
I think so.
and
Yeah.
also celebrities are running for office and winning the
That
highest
part.
seats in the land.
That
Crazy,
part.
but it's happening. And so I think, in America, celebrity is like on this pedestal, like they're
Right.
all powerful. And,
Yeah.
we have to shift that. Like they're not celebrities, they're servants,
Right.
they're public servants.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so we do ourselves a disservice when we kind of get into that aggrandizement of
Yeah.
how politics are today.
Right.
And we got to get back to there's the humility of politics. I
That's
think
incredible.
is what's missing.
Now, how do we get back to that? What do you suggest?
Again, I think it's time for common folk to get out here and run
Yeah.
for these offices.
That's
and
right.
really, I think, especially like I look in, even in our community, we just had a candidate forum, and everything that we heard was we have too many lawyers that are legislators. We have too many people
Yes.
that are, these rich, older. Like if you look at our federal legislators, all
yeah.
of them are like in their 80s.
Yeah.
All of them are Snow White, And so it's like we need folks that are younger. We need more diversity. We need
Yeah.
people that would have lived experience
Absolutely.
to be in these seats. And we
Yeah.
have to encourage that in our communities that, no, you have a voice and you can be up there too, and get behind those types of people. I think that's the challenge
it.
too, is like people
That's the part
that are
there.
candidates have a lot of money,
Right.
to run campaigns. And common people, a lot of times we don't have a lot of money.
That's right.
We don't have a lot of time.
That's right.
We're raising our families, we're working.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you support just regular working class folks to be able to get them into these seats? And so I think that's a conversation we just have to have in our country about shifting the power from these
Shift the
older,
power.
white-haired legislators to younger people with lived experience.
Yeah, and lived experiences is so powerful.
It's powerful.
That's what's really missing from a lot of the decisions that are made is lived experience.
Yeah.
When it's not your reality, you are
Yeah.
completely disconnected from how that policy or that decision is going to impact the day-to-day of the average person.
Right.
So it's very important that we have, these kind of people at the table like you.
Absolutely. And you.
And then how do we get our younger people involved? So like Generation Z, millennials are old now, so we can't call them young anymore.
Right.
But Gen Z,
Yeah.
the alpha
Yeah.
generation, how do we activate them and get them involved too?
It's honestly, and that's one of the things I love about our organization. We're very multi-generational. So
I
we have
love
like
that.
a lot of young folks. We have older people on our team.
Right.
Because that is so important. Like young people have some of the most amazing ideas.
Absolutely.
But they're not always given voice, and they're not always
Right.
given platforms to
Yeah.
be able to express those ideas. And so we're actually right now kicking off a higher education campaign, civic engagement campaign,
Wow.
so that we can engage college students, not just coming to them because, we want you to vote and we want you to
Right.
understand, but to show them how to move power, teaching them
Wow.
what their power is in your college, in
incredible.
your community, and how you can use your voice for advocacy too, how we're
Yeah.
teaching them how to organize themselves. And we just don't do enough of that. Young people in most communities tend to be this kind of forgotten voice, kind of pushed to
Absolutely.
the side.
Absolutely.
And so we need to embrace like preparing them to run for office too.
Yeah.
And not thinking, they're young, so they don't have experience, so I'm not going to vote for them.
Right.
But thinking that like they are a vital part of your community as well.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to sound cliche, but they are the future. Like if you want
Absolutely.
your community to thrive and survive,
Right.
older people are going to die very
Yeah.
soon, right? And you've got to keep a pipeline of young people in your community. That's one of our challenges. We have significant brain drain where young people are leaving our community. I always say graduation day is like the most bittersweet day in our community, because while we're celebrating all of these wonderful graduates, most of them leave our community and never come back because we don't have opportunities for them. And the reason we don't have opportunities for them is because they're not at the table
Right.
making the decisions and and we've not empowered them to be able to have a voice to create the community they want to live in. So
Right.
they go off to Atlanta and to all these other places. So that's a whole other issue, I can talk about forever in rural communities that are struggling because the young people they're leaving and not coming back.
I hear so many stories of young people or just people that are from rural communities that migrate to major cities like Atlanta, and they're like, there's nothing there for me.
No.
And, to hear that this is a huge issue.
Yeah.
So I thought it was maybe just a few, but I'm hearing that this is a huge issue.
Huge issue in
That
rural
once they
communities.
get a certain age, they're leaving out of the community and they're going somewhere else.
And they're going to where the jobs are, where they can raise families, where there's lifestyle and there's things to do that are exciting that you just don't have in rural communities. And again, I think it's because you have the wrong people at the table that are not progressive. And they want to see rural communities stay, these little small towns, these bedroom communities, these retirement communities.
Right.
But the problem with that is their infrastructure is crumbling because you don't have a workforce there that can keep sustaining that community. And so that's why we see a lot of rural communities are falling behind as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
You remind me of Shirley Chisholm.
Oh, that means so much to me. She's one of my heroes. Thank you.
I just see like her all over you, and I don't know
Really?
why.
Oh my gosh, I love that so
Yes,
much.
you
Thank
like
you.
truly like you are like the mantle
Ah,
carrying it on.
that means you have no idea. Like Shirley Chisholm was a giant. Like her voice was a giant. So if I could even be a small part of who she was, that just means so much.
I literally feel like you are. Yeah, you're
you.
right in that pathway, that journey, especially the passion. It literally exuberates from you. Like you can see this is what you eat, sleep, and breathe. This is what you love to do. You can sense that through just the way you talk about it.
It's so funny too, because my mom used to call me Lucy from Peanuts. I don't know if you remember Lucy. So I was always like super. You didn't watch Peanuts, the cartoon. And Lucy was super bossy, and I was like the like chatter box growing up. And it's like now I understand. Like I get to use that.
Yeah.
I get to use that leadership, and sometimes
That's
I can
right.
get bossy and push people to do the right thing.
It takes that.
So
That's right.
I'm excited that I get to use my bossy Lucy
That's
voice
right.
to help my people. Help
Let's
the
go, Bossy
community.
Lucy. That's right. I love it. And then as we're closing, what is one piece of legislation you would love to see passed? I know you're working on a number of things, but if there's one that you would love to see happen, what would that be?
There's so many, and I don't know what this will look like, but I would say we gotta protect Black mothers.
Absolutely.
We have to protect Black mothers. Georgia is the second at the bottom for Black maternal mortality.
Ooh.
And so it is literally like for you to have a baby in the state of Georgia is like a miracle.
Wow.
And that should not be. Like, that is very scary. I have a daughter. You have a daughter that one day may have a child in the state of Georgia, and she has like a 1 in 5 chance of survival.
That's really sad.
Our babies, our infant mortality rates are abysmal.
Wow.
And so that would be the one thing. Like, we have to do something to address that. We have to figure out why that's happening. We know why from a, kind of a racism standpoint.
Absolutely.
But it's like, how do you legislate that? It's really hard. And even if you create laws, like you can't legislate hearts. And that's the hardest thing. And so I think that would be my number one thing is like, how do we protect our Black mothers? How do we protect our young people? And how do we stop them from just dying over simple things that we found in our research, and we work with Morehouse School of Medicine, their Center for Maternal Health Equity, that many of the things they're dying for are preventable.
Wow.
And that's like the knife that's like twisting the knife. Not only are they dying, but it was something that could have been prevented. And so how do we create legislation and laws that protect Black women and allow us to do what we are naturally born to do, and that is be maternal and bring life into this world.
Wow.
Without losing ours.
Without losing ours. And to backtrack, you cannot legislate hearts. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful. But you know what? You have the right heart to legislate. So
thank you.
We need you in those places to continue doing what you're doing. You're doing incredible work, and I'm proud to be your
My
fellow sister.
Yes.
That is watching all of you rising, and to your new podcast as well. If you can just soundbite, how do people?
Yeah, so we have a New South is Rising podcast.
Yes.
It's amazing. We sit on the porch and we have these conversations in a deep way, and we really are about the making sure we dispel the disinformation and misinformation, and just like the rumors and myths about Black folks in the South, that we aren't who you think we are. Like, we are like very open to having these conversations. We have some deep conversations about some real things. And so a New South is Rising podcast is on YouTube. You can find us there. We do have a Facebook page as well. And then you can also follow our SOWEGA Rising page, and that'll be able to send you to our YouTube page. So
amazing.
Check us out.
I cannot wait, guys, to hear this podcast. I already subscribed, so tomorrow I'm going to be listening and get my little Southwest Rising on while I'm driving.
Awesome.
Yes, I can't wait. But it's been such a pleasure. Sherrell, thank you for being with me. Thank you for all that you do. I don't know how you do it.
I don't do it alone.
Thank you.
I have a team, so yeah.
But thank you for the tenacity. It takes a lot. It takes the right heart. It takes tenacity, character, and so much more to do the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. And please keep on pushing because we need you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do. Yes. And guys, we appreciate you too for tuning in and for listening. If this inspired you, we want you to go ahead and share it out to a friend, a colleague, or someone that you care about. We believe in bringing content that elevates you and that inspires you. Please stay tuned. We will be back next week with more content that inspires you. We love you guys so much. Stay tuned.